to discuss this issue. Let me go through the names briefly. We have Avril Doria from the United States. She is connecting online. She's independent researcher on internet governance, and she has been engaged in various internet governance projects and study research for a long time, both research and practice perspectives. She's connecting online, and on site we have Amrita Chaudhary. She's from India. She has among the various hats she's director of CCAOI, and she also serves as chair of APR IGF, and Avery and Amrita both served as MAG members in previous years. We have another speaker unfortunately connecting online, Lilian Nalboga. She's from Uganda. She's president of Internet Society Uganda. She also served as IGF MAG member between 2012 and 2014. And we have Junko Kawauchi. She's from Japan. She's a current MAG member. She's from the Center for International Economic Cooperation. She acts as online facilitator today. And me, Keisuke Kamimura. I am the moderator for this session. Let me give you the context of this session. Multi-stakeholder model is becoming even more important in the governance of information society. For example, ICANN has been a successful example of multi-stakeholder governance. And more recently, the Global Digital Compact refers to multi-stakeholder models in various policy areas. So, multi-stakeholder model is becoming quite important today. However, the scope of multi-stakeholder-based governance is expanding. For one, policy issues are diverse. We are now talking about various other issues than domain names or IP addresses and other core internet resource management. So we have quite a broad range of policy issues today in terms of internet governance. For second, participants are even more diverse. As the policy areas are expanding, we have broader range of participants joining in the discussion. And accordingly, geographic and cultural diversity may also be considered. We have quite different geographic and cultural perspectives in the way we make decisions or we make discussions. So our question is as follows: does the multi-stakeholder model equally fit each of these policy areas, or are we going to have somewhat multiple different models in dealing with the range of policy issues? And if we have multiple multi-stakeholder models, how can we make multi-stakeholder governance work across the broad range of policy issues? So that's the basic outline of this session. But let me give you some brief overview of the project behind. As I mentioned, our session is based on the discussion or analysis conducted by the research group under the Center for International Economic Cooperation on Internet Governance. So let me give you some introduction of the project. The research group is a multi-stakeholder group of experts and academics on internet governance, research, and practice based in Japan. We have members from the government, the private sector, technical community, and academia. So we are discussing, the group has discussed this issue for a while since last September, October. And we looked at the changes of the internet governance landscape over the last 20 plus years. And Japan hosted IGF last year, so we produced an unofficial report on IGF 2023. Actually, later this week, we have a lightning talk session featuring the report booklet on IGF 2023. So if you are on site, please jump in and see what the report looked like. And we also did a comment contribution to WSIS Plus 20 review. And we also examined GDC draft texts and considered its impact on internet governance and future forecast of its future forecast. We also conducted a session in APR IGF 2024 in Taipei. Our session was titled Multi-Stakeholderism in the Post-GDC Era. So during this activity, we came to some sense of understanding or conclusion that applicability of multi-stakeholder models may vary depending on the policy areas in question and needs to be evaluated on a set of criteria so that we can see how effectively multi-stakeholder model work or not. So that was the brief overview of the project behind this session. And I talked about the multi-stakeholder concept is referred in a diverse context. Let me give you let me take GDC as an example. In the GDC, there are a number of references made to the term multi-stakeholder. One example is multi-stakeholder. Our cooperation will be multi-stakeholder in paragraph AK, or in paragraph 17A, we are going to develop, disseminate, and maintain through multi-stakeholder cooperation. In terms of the digital divide, we have another reference to multi-stakeholder, the term multi-stakeholder in paragraph 27, internet governance. And so the references go on like this. And multi-stakeholder initiatives are also mentioned in paragraph 31A, digital trust and safety. So multi-stakeholder, and there are a number of other references to multi-stakeholder in other policy areas, interoperable data governance, artificial intelligence, and follow-up and review. So the term multi-stakeholder is one, but the contexts where the term is referred to are quite diverse. So that's one point we came to realize. I also mentioned that we have a broad range of policy areas being discussed in the GDC or broader internet governance context now. In the GDC text, we have connectivity, digital literacy, skills and capacities, digital public goods and digital public infrastructure, and the list goes to interoperable data governance and artificial intelligence. So we refer to multi-stakeholder models or multi-stakeholder approach in these quite a broad range of policy areas. So even if we say, even if we are agreed on the term multi-stakeholder, the actual implementations or adaptability may be quite different. So let me summarize our outcomes of the research group on internet governance. One is expanding scope. So we consider we need multi-stakeholder model because we have fast-changing policy areas, and those policy areas directly affect the life and behavior of people. But with the expanding scope, multi-stakeholder model may work better for some issues and not for others. That's one of our concerns. Another concern is multi-stakeholder disguise. Multi-stakeholder models may take various forms. In idealistic form, multi-stakeholder model may mean multi-stakeholder participation, multi-stakeholder decision-making, and multi-stakeholder implementation. But in some cases, multi-stakeholder may just stop at consultation. So we have to take care of what we call multi-stakeholder disguise. Expanding participation is another concern we considered. For multi-stakeholder models to be fully effective, we have engagement of smaller voices or the voices of the influenced. But how far does participation and engagement go? How far should they go? So that's another concern we had. And if we have multiple multi-stakeholder models, we better have core principles such as inclusion and bottom-up structure. These principles should always be in place, while other principles may not. So we may have core principles for multi-stakeholder models, but we also have non-core principles. And finally, long-term goals. What do we want multi-stakeholder models for? So this is the summary of the discussion we had in the research group on internet governance. So so we have to evaluate multi-stakeholder models in some way or the other. One way is to look at it from a process point of view. Net Mundial plus 10 multi-stakeholder statement is one of the guidelines that we can use for evaluating multi-stakeholder readiness of a policy process. Or maturity levels, which is presented by Avery Doria, one of today's speakers. We can look at the multi-stakeholderness of a process from this perspectives. Or there are other researchers presenting presenting evaluation framework for multi-stakeholder models, Palladino and Santaniello, or Pandey, Mueller, and Badi. We realized that people are becoming aware of the necessity to evaluating across different multi-stakeholder models. So this is one of the issues we want to discuss further today. But we also are concerned that there should be other elements in evaluating multi-stakeholder models. The works I just mentioned look more of the multi-stakeholder model from a process point of view, but we thought there should be other elements we need to consider in evaluating multi-stakeholder models' applicability or applicability. One such element is the policy. One such element is the characteristics of a policy issue in question. Take digital literacy, for example. It is very likely that we need multi-stakeholder model, but there are some areas where multi-stakeholder model may not work effectively or efficiently. Digital trust and safety seemingly less likely that multi-stakeholder model is fully applied. And digital economy, I don't know how MSM, multi-stakeholder model works. So we even if we are agreed on we need even if we are agreed on that we need multi-stakeholder models, there are quite different implementations or applicabilities out there. So this is what we want to discuss today. So this is the key question. But this is the brief overview of the session. But I would like to invite Avery Doria, who has done a series of works on the evaluation or maturity level of the multi-stakeholder models. So, Avery, you have the floor.
Thank you. I need to share my slides. I think you need to, okay, no. Let me see. Okay. And share. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about multi-stakeholders. I'm doing a little bit more than just the model because I need to sort of work my way to the model and what it consists of. First, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me to talk about this. Thank you very much for the introduction. And while I may quibble with you about some of the things that you said in the introduction, I very much appreciate it. For example, I tend to believe that a form of the multi-stakeholder model can be used just about anywhere a group of people need to make decisions together. I tend to think that we're never in a situation of all or nothing in terms of the model. So let me move on to my first slide. Okay, so part of what brought me to this discussion and the context in which I started looking at it was this sort of tussle, this dichotomy. Are we working in multilateral? Are we working in multi-stakeholder? Are there issues that can only be dealt with in a multilateral method? Can multi-stakeholder be used? Do multilateral and multi-stakeholder modalities ever work together, or are they completely incompatible? And basically, this is also part of the question that the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines look at it. sort of, sometimes you hear people talk about, well, they're really being, continuums in discussions. But you would also hear people that were quite angrily when a multilateral group tried to do a little bit of, stakeholder discussion or stakeholder opening, you know, people would scream, no, 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 that's not multi-stakeholder because it's only comments. It's only, and that sort of rang a bell with me and sort of said, no, if a multilateral process manages to reach out and to stakeholders and start including them, that's something we need to encourage. We need to understand it. We need to understand its limitations. So anyhow, the two methods are, rather different. The multilateral is sort of the very formal negotiations, whether they're bilateral, trilateral, multilateral. They work on a basis of full consensus. There's ratification. Whereas within a multi-stakeholder approach, and that seems to be a word that's being used a lot, you find that each group that does them, while they're working on similar principles, tends to develop a different set of modalities, a different set of ways of doing it, diverse decision-making procedures. And this way of doing things has sometimes we spend almost as much time, I think, talking about the difference between multilateral processes and multi-stakeholder processes as we do actually talking about the specific issues. But anyhow, we have, ICANN, the IGF as a multi-stakeholder body, IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, and the Regional Internet Registries, the RIRs. They all have very rich multi-stakeholder models, and yet they're all somewhat different. And so when you start looking at how do I build something with a multi-stakeholder model, or how do I apply multi-stakeholder modalities to the multilateral model, there's a lot of issues to look at. That's one of the places where the Sao Paulo multi-stakeholder guidelines also comes in useful, because they look at modalities, they encourage the notion of application of some multi-stakeholder modalities within a multilateral environment. So it becomes something that has a set of guidelines for how these two very different and constantly tussling models can actually work together. So just a brief slide on this. I will not go into these in deadlines. The Net Mundial in 2014 laid out a set of principles, multi-stakeholder, open, participatory, consensus-driven, etc. And these have really held through. Nobody looks at this list of attributes and sort of says, well, no, that's not what multi-stakeholder is about. That's not what internet governance is about. But what they did put together is a set of guidelines and process steps for how to do it. And I really recommend reading it. And it's section 3.2 of Net Mundial plus 10, which for several pages goes through and gives a set of recommendations. I've also really gotten into word art today. I actually took section 3.2 and did that little piece of word art with it. And just, I kind of like the whole idea of a rainbow bridging them. But anyhow, moving on. So we have people that said, I'm doing something multi-stakeholder. You're not doing something multi-stakeholder. So how do then we deal with it? And that's where I go back to sort of a definition of multi-stakeholderism, where it's the study and practice of various models, approaches, forms of participatory, open, and accessible, organized, human-centered efforts. And it is something where many models, there isn't one model. There isn't the notion of one model that fits all. As long as you are delivering on these principles, then the model matters less than the fact that you are using some set of techniques to achieve that. So basically, there's a large set of models and modalities. But when you start then comparing them and looking into them, it's sort of taking the multi-stakeholder model. And what we often do is hand wave about it. We sort of say, yes, it's multi-stakeholder because, well, because the stakeholders are there and they're participating. Whereas taking down to the next level of analysis is start looking at various aspects. I picked 3 aspects here for an example, but other aspects are quite possible, you know, and like methods of selecting participants, funding methods, geographical, cultural. But the 3 I'm focusing on at the beginning are orientation. Is your model a bottom-up model, a top-down model, one of those start in the middle and then, you know, do a little bit of up and a little bit of down? Any of those can be used to build a multi-stakeholder model. They don't all need to be bottom-up. However, each one of them is going to give you a slightly different model. So being aware of the orientation of the model you look at becomes critical. The next part is of the analysis is participants, the stakeholders, you know, and by the way, we call them stakeholders. There are people that love that term. There are people that hate that term. Basically, this whole notion of calling it multi-stakeholder is really something that came about during WIS's time. But people have been experimenting, you know, with various forms of this model all the way through the 20th century. And it wasn't just in internet. You find various usages of the model in different, or the approach in different topics. But when we look at stakeholders, even in our own area, you know, we have the Tunis Agenda, GDC, et cetera, way of bringing in stakeholders and identifying them. You know, there are 3, there are 4, et cetera. There's affinity groupings where people of a similar interest gather together to work on a problem, but they have different, you know, whether it's the plumbers and the electricians, they have different affinities, they look at the world differently, and therefore they bring different approaches in. You have some that organize organizations, and only organizations are members, and others individuals. In the engineering task force, I very much see it as a multi-stakeholder organization with this umbrella definition, and it's individuals. It's not organizations. It's not memberships and such. So looking at that, and anytime you're creating a new organization with a multi-stakeholder model, you have to look at your stakeholders. You have to look at your participants and think about how you organize them, because that will give you a different looking model. And then finally, in this 3 aspect, there's the roles and responsibilities. Can you contribute? In other words, can you contribute text? Can you contribute ideas? And are they accepted and used? These all, or are you part of the decision-making processes? Just make recommendations, advice. And you look at any project, you'll find at different phases of a project, the stakeholders may have different roles. They may have different responsibilities. You can't look at a large model and say in total, those are the deciders and those are, because at different phases of the model, that may come out differently. Finally, getting myself to the maturity models. So let's say you've done many of these aspect studies and you start to have an idea of the structure and the understanding. So then I started looking at, since I didn't want to exclude someone from multi-stakeholder modalities simply because all they did was solicit comments and then actually consider them. Because soliciting comments and ignoring them, I tend to leave out, and we have seen some examples of that lately. So that may be a concern. But comments that are really solicited and are considered is really one of the bases on which almost any multi-stakeholder model and maturity has to be built. But then you move up, and are there standing chartered advisory groups and who have roles and responsibilities, who give advice, who do analysis, who propose solutions, etc. Is that something that's in the norm, that's in the fixed structure of the organization, the model you're looking at? Then you get to decision making. Who makes the decision? What role does a stakeholder group have in decision making? And it isn't just who is the final decider, but decision making is a larger process. And there may be other parts where people contribute to the decision making process, even if they are not voting on it at the very end. But then it goes beyond that. Once you've made a decision and you've gone that, and then some group or other goes to implement it, goes to deploy it, goes to take it out into the world and sort of do something, is it being done consistently? Is the decision that was made by one group of people being followed through? Does it work? Does it not work? Does it need to be changed? And then finally, another piece in the maturity is you've put all this together. You've got comments, you've got committees, you've got, decision making, and you've even got implementation reviews. Who has responsibility for oversight of reviewing your model, your approach, and making sure that it works, that makes sure that it makes sense? Is it a bottom-up oversight where the stakeholders themselves are the ones that are doing that? Or is there some sort of deus ex machina, some superior, some UN General Assembly that's doing the oversight of review and such? So when I'm starting to look at that, and then I start to look at how the various aspects in the previous slide sort of feed into these maturity levels is the way I've started looking. So we're not in a situation that says I'm multi-stakeholder, you're not, but we start looking at our various levels of maturity within these models and how we can sort of move to a greater maturity in multi-stakeholder models. And I think that's it. So thank you for letting me go through that rather quickly. These are slides I could spend hours on, or just a few minutes I've spent. So thanks.
Thank you, thank you, Avery. So I would like to draw the reflections of the panel. Avery, Amrita, would you give you some comments on my tone setting, or comments by Avery?
Yeah, I hope I'm audible now. So yes, I completely agree with what Avri said, and I think she said most of what we would want to say, as in there is no, the multi-stakeholder model has different forms. It can be used in different ways, and there is no one size that fits all. And it is practiced in different ways, in different levels. It could be at the consultative phases. It could also be at decision making or even implementation. But again, what needs to be seen is, are the right stakeholders there? It doesn't mean everyone has to be there, but the people who are relevant needs to be there. One of the comments which you made initially is it applicable to digital economy? Yes, it is. For example, if you're looking at payments, which is an integral part of the digital economy, how it is even at the grassroots level, the payments are working, whether people are literate, and I come from India where digital payments are used, even illiterate people are using. Are they able to use it safely, securely, or easily in their own languages? That matters. If you don't take the feedback from them, even if you design it the best of solutions, it's not going to work. It cannot just be multilateral. And I presume it is not applicable in all spheres, because we need to go back and see why different stakeholders or participants are necessary. Because internet today affects each and every one in different ways. So till the time you do not have different people coming and speaking, it's difficult. For example, in AI, there may be software technologists sitting and planning it. But if you want the rights perspectives, the privacy by design, the human rights aspect to be built into those systems, you need those kind of people in the room. You also need to have other people, for example, the sustainability, people who are looking at energy consumption, etc., in the room. obviously you need government, you need social activists or civil society. Else, how would you build a model which is impacting us in a huge way to take care of those things? Because if you don't take care of the risks earlier, you will not be able to take care of it later. Similarly, when you're talking about trust and safety, yes, security experts can do it, law enforcement can use it, but even if at the individual user level you don't understand what the issues are, you will not be able to take care. Simple example, you have online gaming, children are playing it. You may want to regulate them, but do you know what actual issues are or where they are playing it? For example, if people who are actually playing games are not there when these discussions happen on digital trust and safety, just governments or regulators taking the decisions may not give the results which you would actually want. And obviously, there was a question, I don't know, on the maturity markets. It again depends. There are developing countries who have leapfrogged into technology. For them, coming into the conversation, it may take a more longer time to make it more inclusive. For example, if I take an example in India, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India has consultations on all their aspects. They have consultations, they put it up transparently on the website, and then finally they give their directions or recommendations. But again, if we look at some discussions like we had for the data privacy regulation, we had a consultative phase. However, how it was used was never known. So I would say even in South Asia, it depends upon the maturity of the country or market, because they're still grappling with other issues. So it may take time. But I think the Sao Paulo guiding principles are essential. It also gives a checklist to multilateral organizations on what they need to look at if they want to make it more inclusive. And they also have it on how the multi-stakeholder processes, what checklists they need to have. And they have the process steps also, like scoping the issue better, identifying who the relevant stakeholder for that discussion is, engaging them, sharing information, because not everyone may be at the same level, or even facilitating a dialogue after discussing, sharing with people. So I think it has 12 such process steps, which could be a good, I would say, reference point for everyone to look. But yes, it cannot be a one-size-fits-all for everything, but it is definitely necessary in today's digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Emerita. Now we have Lillian. Do you have your views on this? Can you join now?
Yes, can you hear me? Let me see if my video. Yes, so thank you for having
Yes,
me.
yes.
And
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a bit of some few thoughts on your presentation, and probably in agreement with what Avri just presented, especially relating to, say, Africa or Uganda. But just a reflection is, I think in one of your, in one of the questions that you raised, one of the points that you mentioned that the multi-stakeholder model works for some issues and not others. I'm a bit, I think, also Amrit has mentioned that. I think I'm slightly in disagreement, because if we are looking at the digital space, there are quite different issues that come into play. So especially the one that you raised on digital economy, and I think Amrit has mentioned some bits of that. So I think depending on the maturity level or the different pockets that Avri has mentioned, I think it should be able to work, but the context kind of differs. The other thing that I wanted to point on is the multi-stakeholder disguise. Kind of interesting how you framed it, and I like the question. I mean, you put the disguise in quotes, And this, we kind of see it happen a lot, where to some, it is more of, if there's a consultation, then with the multi-stakeholder, model, has been affected. And this is something that I really find a bit disturbing. But looking at the presentations from Avery on the maturity levels, who starts the process, is it top, bottom, or, starts, in the middle? Where do we draw the line to conclude that this indeed has been a multi-stakeholder kind of, approach that has been, taken? So in Africa and in many countries in Africa, we have the issue of the multi-stakeholder disguise, where you have a few, kind of entities or groups. For instance, let's say there's an issue or developing a kind of, a policy kind of document. You'll find that the policymaker will invite probably two. Let's, for instance, say it is around, say, cybersecurity. You'll find that you may have just two entities represented in the initial, drafting process of, say, this document. You'll find the government, you'll find maybe the private sector, someone in the banking sector, and a representative from maybe academia. And then this will be consultative. And fast forward, the policy will be kind of, adopted. So again, when we look at the broader multi-stakeholder model, can we say that this is, the multi-stakeholder, was really a very well conclusive approach? So I think we are seeing lots of this multi-stakeholder disguise, and I think if we go back to what Avery may have listed, then we may need to rethink on who constitutes to be on the table for us to say that, multi-stakeholderism has been applied. Reacting also to the very first, I think in your presentation, that, the selective, yes, I think I've mentioned that. Yes, there's a bit of selectiveness, especially if the issue at hand is, may consider, may bring some tension, within the different actors. So you'll find, like you said, digital economy may not be needed for, multi-stakeholder approach. So this kind of, whoever is leading this process, that kind of, looking at it, policy issue, we select this, we leave that. I think that is really something that needs to be put into consideration. It's a wrong approach, and we are seeing this happening in most of the African countries, even my country where I come from, Uganda. Last but not least, I would like to say that from what captured my mind was in the presentation, Avery mentioned the different processes, and where do we put this all together? The multilateral kind of, processes where you see the ITU being, active, that versus those that are pushing for, stakeholder, governance model, the ICANNs, the IGF and all that. And the participation we see of certain actors tend to go much in the treaty kind of, processes. And in most cases, these are kind of selective. They're addressing certain issues. For instance, if you see now, like the way ITU, maybe we're seeing so many of countries in Africa being more present, more active in ITU, processes than in these other, kind of, say WCS, IGF, ICANN. There's little of that kind of, how do you draw the line? So where is that mix? I think there was some kind of an infinity symbol, how do we put this all together and constitute, not to just, addressing policy issues one by one. So I have a feeling that this is something we are from Uganda or from Africa, we still are at the point of consultative, model, maturity. Yes, we have a few consultations, we have a few representatives present, and then we conclude that this is a multi-stakeholder kind of, model approach has taken place. But again, this is really, it is not that inclusive if we are to look at the MSM has been presented by the previous speakers, mainly on the maturity in implementation tracking. It is still not clear who is doing what. The oversight of the review also, there are issues of, how do you track who is doing what, who is responsible. In many cases, if it is a policy deployment, it is very hard to track the review and what informs another review if it is needed. So I would say, I think I am in agreement, but also a bit in context on the issue of maybe that we need to leave some issues, some issues may not require, the approach. I think the multi-stakeholder model approach needs to be deployed at different, at different levels, depending on where you are in the maturity process. But I think at least consultative and implementation, there has to be some bit of representation from the different actors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. It's a pity that you can make it online to the IGF, but you cannot make it on site. So I know you are in a difficult situation.
Hopefully I'll be able to see it tomorrow. Yes.
So I hope your luggage will come to you in the end.
I hope so too. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment. I mentioned the multi-stakeholder disguise. If it's, I'm not sure if it's the right word to use, but I'm a bit concerned that diversity of issues, we have diverse issues, so that we have different types of multi-stakeholder models. But if so, we have to carefully we have to carefully design the multi-stakeholder process to deal with the issue in the right way. So, Amrita just pointed out that any policy item has some kind of multi-stakeholder elements in it. So even digital economy have some multi-stakeholder elements in it. But how we can evaluate whether the issue is dealt with in a proper way? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you. So the first thing is, for decision makers or even governments who have not taken that approach completely, and it is a multi-stakeholderism in disguise, which I would call as tokenism. We've seen processes like GDC also saying multi-stakeholder. Personally, I do not believe it was multi-stakeholder. It was not at all transparent or accountable. So I think the first thing, when people, as in governments, have a right to decide upon their sovereign interests, it's absolutely okay. But they need to understand something, that will it be helpful? Are they getting all the issues and all the concerns? Objections doesn't mean someone is raising an objection for the heck of it. They are raising it because there is a genuine reason also. If you take it into consideration, act on that or don't act on that, at least take it into consideration, there is a more buy-in from the different, I would say, actors in that ecosystem. So I think if they understand that having a more open approach to get the actual issues, even at a consultative phase, and even, after a policy is formed, for example, many times governments fail is because they took in information only from few select people, and during the implementation time they falter because the buy-in is not there from everyone. And that is where the issue happens. If you had taken a more consultative approach, it would have been much better. And so if they understand the value of it, that is the time they will use it more. Now, there was a statement which Lillian made, and I do agree with it. Developing countries don't look at internet governance with that much of priority, because connectivity is an issue, health is an issue, getting people jobs is an issue, feeding people is an issue. So will they not look at those issues first and then look at internet governance? For them, that is priority. And they will go and talk in those forums where that is priority. So we also have to understand the maturity, and these countries have limited resources, so they cannot put in so much of resource. So you have to know how to balance it out, and internet actually provides that leveler thing. So if they can use those things to get more views rather than be restrictive, and I have seen it in my country also at times, people feel worried of what kind of comments they will get. But once people starts commenting, people also mature in the way they give comments. So I think these guidelines which Sao Paulo gives, unfortunately all governments have not endorsed it, probably because it has not been spread so much. If they go out more naturally, people will not be defensive, because each country actually wants to leapfrog, grow, and serve their people better. So I think if we can explain it, no, it's not a fancy term, it will help you in the long run to get the results you want. And these are the guidelines which you can work on. You don't have to create it and cherry pick whichever you want. I think that would help.
Thank you, Marita. I have one question for Avri, and then we will like to open the floor to the audience. Avri, as I mentioned, I am interested in the topic or issue-oriented differences in applying multi-stakeholder models in your explanation, how policy by topic differences are considered. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that is actually a parallel set of issues. I think that it's one that comes out, for example, when you're selecting your participants, selecting your stakeholders, that's one of the places where the subject matter becomes a big concern. Because what kind of specialists do you need? What are the groups? Who is it that's participating in this? So from one aspect, I say, anytime you want to make a decision in a democratic manner, and you want to make it in a participatory democratic manner, where all the people that have some part of their life involved in this decision get a say, get to participate, then when you're putting it together, you basically have to look at, well, if we're going to be behaving in a multi-stakeholder manner on this topic, who do we need? You know, if we're discussing how to control fire threats within a city, you know, it's still very much a multi-stakeholder issue because it concerns the citizens, it concerns the fire department, it concerns emergency services, the government, the volunteers, the people that come through and rescue the burn victims. So you have a great number of people that are all sort of contributing to an event. You want the planning for these things, the understanding, the preparation for these disasters to be done in a way that makes sense to all those that are involved in the doing of it, that have responsibilities for it, that provide the funding for it, that provide the technology for it, that provide the workers that make it happen. So understanding who is involved in dealing with this particular issue allows you to build that participant group, that stakeholder group. Again, depending on the topic, when you're looking at advice recommendations, do you have scientists that give advice at a purely scientific level, but really don't care about the rest of it? So how do you design their advice section in? It's nice that I put these here simple words, but each one of these has a level that you have to deepen. You know, what does it mean to contribute to a subject in different fields? Is it writing a paragraph? Is it building something? Is it coming up with some sort of template? So each of these things gets looked at. And if you looked at the other parts that I included at the bottom, you know, the other aspects, you know, the funding methods, geographical indicators that makes a difference, you know, where you're doing this is obviously going to change. If you're doing it in Africa, or you're doing it in Asia, or you're doing it in Europe, it's going to have different aspects because people look at the issues differently, so you'll structure it differently. You know, the cultural aspects of when people talk, how they interact. Is this being done more locally, or is this a regional issue, or is this an international issue? Is going to sort of direct the kind of structure, the kind of analysis you have to look at in doing it. You know, I didn't get into it all, the intersectional measures and the diversity elements and all of that, which are different. We have a different set of diversity elements depending on where we're doing it and what kind of population. You know, the scope of interest. So there are many different aspects. I was really, you know, just trying to keep it sort of at a simple level that to understand what we're doing, we got to keep breaking it down into what are the important aspects of the model. And then within each of those aspects for any subject, there's going to be an other set of considerations. So that's why I come down to and say, I cannot envision a subject where there isn't a set of stakeholders, participants, concerned citizens, etc. Any number of words. I'm not really hung up on the words, but there's basically a group of stakeholders that have a concern and whose concerns need to be listened to, need to be understood, needed to be included in the decision making, etc. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a model that can be used in any number of situations, but you got to do a lot of thinking about it to make it work. Hope that answers it.
Thank you very much. Now we would like to open the floor to the audience. If you have any comment or question, please come to the microphone, or yes, I'll just take the mic. Otherwise, Zoom participants will not be able to hear your voice.
Is that okay? That's on. Hi, Jim Prendergast with the Galway Strategy Group. Thanks for the session. Picking up a little bit on what Avri said, I think, and Amrita said, we just need to be cautious about mislabeling processes as multi-stakeholder when they're not. And you pointed out the GDC, and all those who are familiar with the model knew right away, you know, this doesn't feel right, it's not sitting right. So I think we use that as a teaching opportunity, as an opportunity to educate people about the model, because not everybody's familiar with it, and particularly in the multilateral space, it's very new to them. And we should encourage them to continue to try and adopt it, but using things like the Sao Paulo principles as a guide, not necessarily as, you know, you have to use all of the principles, but use that as inspiration to better improve the processes, I think is something that we as the community can do to make them better going forward.
Thank you for your comment. Just for your information, I referred to the GDC because I wanted to show the diversity of issues being discussed in the frame of internet governance. So I don't think GDC is completely multi-stakeholder model, or I'm a bit skeptical about it. So just don't get me wrong.
Can I jump in with a response also?
And I agree. I think one of the distinctions that I've made in looking at the GDC processes is meaningful multi-stakeholderism. Asking for input and not reflecting back to the community how the input was used, what portions were rejected, which were accepted. How did you change the direction of the policy? That's meaningful. Giving that feedback to stakeholders, that's meaningful. Asking for a bunch of comments and then either doing nothing with them or not telling us how you've done something with them, that's not meaningful. And that, people are only they're going to get tired of that after a while and not want to participate. But my point is, it happened. We can learn from it. Let's teach people how to do better going forward, so that it is meaningful and it is productive and everybody sees value in it.
Thank you. Avery?
Thank you. Jim just said much of what I was going to add in there. But yes, and in fact, that's why I had written on that bottom ring, not only consulting, but paying attention to it. And I like your notion of the multi-stakeholder disguise, because a term I had not thought of before, because it does cover that, where you can act like you're doing something that is multi-stakeholder without the follow through, without it being a meaningful action. So I think that is something to be very careful of. I personally think that if there is a good consultative and it is paid attention to and there's feedback and is that, even if you don't go beyond it to what I'm calling the other levels of maturity, then you could still say, yeah, you've dipped your toes into the multi-stakeholder. You have had some multi-stakeholder modalities, but the actions that you take have to be genuine. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery. And Amrita, please.
Thank you. What I would like to add is, while GDC definitely was not a process which was completely multi-stakeholder, one thing we could look at is at least it tried to get people to respond. But again, it was not transparent, it was not open how consultations were used, and it was not inclusive. A simple example, when you want comments from Global South at a time which is not friendly to them, and I speak from Asia Pacific, most of the UN consultations were at very odd hours for people in Asia. You had to keep your video on. Think of the countries where you do not have that much of internet bandwidth, and keeping it on or you will be disconnected. It's not inclusive. You will not get people. You would not have found so many people from Asia in those calls because the hours were very bad. Also, when people, the other stakeholders were making comments, the rooms were empty. So it didn't give a very good feeling to the others who were participating online that they were being heard. They may have been heard, we don't know, because we don't know how the, the feedback from everyone was used. So I think it is a lesson, as Jim said, if we can learn it well, we will do our WSIS plus 20 negotiations much better.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amrita. And is there anyone who can? Okay, there's a gentleman at the table.
Bukato, can you hear me? From Japan, and thank you for a very interesting, debates and the presentations here. Thought, listening to all of you, I was wondering if we can have some global analysis jointly in some way with the people in this room, for instance, if some of the multi-stakeholder model, worked or not. As Avery is, talking about, there are many different models and occasions, even outside of a digital world. And of course, in a digital, we started the concept probably around the creation of ICANN in 90s. And then through WIS's process, we talked about much of this in a context of government versus non-government and international government organizations dealing with internet issues or not. And luckily enough, ICANN survived as it is, and the government is only a CAC advisory committee and not making a direct decision making. That's very important fact. But IGF model is completely different. It's not a decision making body. It is just a discussion process. But at the same time, we have to look at the good aspect, the good result of IGF. For instance, people are gathering here, listening to others, what's going on rule making in individual countries, and after we go back home and talk internally within a country, we create some of the similar laws or similar debates there. That created a lot of opportunity for countries to have their own more harmonized system on a global basis, and those are very small examples. But if you look at the other areas other than digital, there must be some discussions going on, such as SDGs. We had in New York in September. That was more on SDG, kind of, debate, and the digital was a part of that. Whether we could, use a multi-stakeholder model, to other areas, I think this is a time we really, think and, do a good analysis on a global basis. And I think for that purpose, everybody, has to, present some of the practices, examples, what's going on. And probably we should talk to our friends working on some other areas, and if their model or their organization or processes are working well or not. I think using Aburi's maturity model, if we use more on the maturity, and if we digest the benefit of those multi-stakeholder model, I think we can be better off by having such example and find out some best practices there, and probably at the next meeting we can get together and exchange some examples.
Thank you very much. So we have some kind of international comparison of various models and in various practices. We may need to take consider the possibility of doing that kind of research forward. Thank you very much. We have a parallel discussion going on in the Zoom chat. So there's a comment from Mark Nottingham. It would be interesting to hear reactions to Milton Mueller's characterization of multi-stakeholder as an empty label that does not describe a governance model. And so, Avery, can you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. I'd love to answer it, and I'd also like to. I missed the gentleman who had been speaking before his name, but I'd like to make some comments on that too. Partly the answer that I put there is I very much agree that at the moment, I said, and in fact, I think I even said in my presentation, we very much hand wave when we say multi-stakeholder, because we haven't done the deeper diving into what we mean when we say it. What are the aspects? How do we put them together and such? We've done a little bit of that kind of analysis. But by and large, whenever you see someone new coming into saying, gee, we'd like to do some multi-stakeholder, whose model should we buy? Can we do the ICANN model? Can we do the IETF model? And that never works for people because nobody fits anybody else's shoes that well. So I believe that what I'm putting forward here, and other people are putting forward here, is sort of the meat on what is in the model? How do we define it? How do we identify it? And to go on to the second gentleman's, and if I apologize for forgetting the name, question is, I think that's the next step. As we start to, and it's some of the stuff that I'm doing in the background too, you know, but it's just me doing it. It's not a, you know, organized thing, is sort of as these analyses of what is in the various aspects and how one defines them, then to take those and use them to do analyses on some of our existing organizations, some of our existing practices. So that is indeed the intent. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery. In my understanding, Milton's point is that internet governance is about non-state actors deciding principles and implementing them. So to me, actually, Milton is going to have a dialogue on multi-stakeholder measurement right after this session as part of the GigaNet symposium. So if you are interested, please go to the session after hours. But so to me, it seems like that Milton is looking at the topic by topic differences in terms of internet governance. But I maybe ask him later. Oh, Avery, do you have any comments? Your face just popped up. No. Okay. Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry.
What he mentioned in terms of stakeholder-wise accountability is also important, because if you're giving inputs, whether you're accountable for it later is also important, and I think it comes with maturity of a model. So I think certain things are important, because and that whether you're accountable for it would also come during the implementation part or even the follow-up part. So I think looking at it in a broader scope, the phase, etc., is important to actually do it. But I think accountability of whoever is the stakeholder is also important.
Good. Thank you very much. Do you have any other comment or question from the audience? If not, let me give you the final question for the speakers. So future. So what should we expect about multi-stakeholder model in the future? So what kind of principles should be shared across policy areas or geographic areas? So what do you see will become of the multi-stakeholder model in near future? Do we keep going on the same thing, or do we need somewhat different action? What's your thought? Amrita, please.
So I think whatever terminology you use, all participants who have vested interest or may have should be there when discussions happen, or on policies, on issues where their lives are at stake or something is in stake. You call it multi-stakeholder, you call it whichever terminology, it is important. Because if anyone wants a particular policy process to work, you have to have the buy-in of the people. For example, now GDC has been ratified. It has to be implemented. If it has the buy-in of everyone, nation states, companies, technical community, civil society, etc., being a Herculean task, only then will it be able to achieve what it wants to achieve. So whatever terminology you use, you have to have relevant people interested or accountable in the room.
Thank you. Lydian, do you have? Can you give us your thoughts on the future of multi-stakeholderism?
Thanks. Yeah, so for me, just to add to what Amrita has mentioned, is it's not just about participation and having, people present by ticking numbers, it should be more transparency, inclusion, being more, making stakeholders accountable. So it doesn't matter if, for instance, if it's at the global level and you're considering, say, the global majority voices and having a few countries or represented, and then this is called that, we had representation from this particular kind of, people from, say, the global majority. So there has to be what kind of contribution are they bringing on in place. So right now, the future of the global of the multi-stakeholder model is really at it is in suspense because it's not just so clear what we really want. Some people really want to have the continue with the multilateral, having a few people on the table at more of a high level. But I think there has to be inclusive participation, transparency and accountability in what is being discussed, and also the ease of being able to track the outcomes of the whatever process or whatever decision that comes out of the consultations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Avery, one last word, please.
Thank you. First of all, pointing out that, it is still, even if it did start in the last century, it still is a very young model. We're still figuring out. I personally think it is a essential, critical model necessary in any sort of democratic movement we're going to do. Representative democracy is wonderful, but it doesn't get the people participating. It doesn't get them heard. It doesn't get them understood. So I think that this is a model that we need to keep developing. We need to go doing this deeper analysis. We need to go out and check, the organizations that are and continuing to enrich and to make the model richer so that it can be done. And now, pretty much all the way through this, I've sort of been almost sounding sometimes like a cheerleader, like I think it's all easy and it all works. And, accountability, for example, is a big, difficult topic. The topic that worries me the most, that I don't even feel that I have a good grasp on and how to deal with it, is even if you've got a measure for accountability and you've got a measure for who gets to participate and all that, it's the notion of everybody dealing with the process in good faith. And often when I've seen situations where it looks like, gee, things are really laid out well for this part of a multi-stakeholder process to actually work and deliver something that does respond to the needs of the stakeholders, there are those with less than good faith that throw wrenches in. We use words like disinformation these days. It used to be something else, or that. And how the model protects itself against things like that, things like what you suggested, the sort of disguised or the imitation of the model without it being genuine. So that's one of the places where I'm still very much, but I think going forward, what we got to do is develop the analysis better, and we've got to start applying that analysis against existing and future efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Avery. I quite agree with the last point that Avri made. We have to look into what's below the multi-stakeholder tokenism or disguise or whatever you call it. And there is a quite a lot of research will be necessary. So thank you very much. Thank you all. We have still a bit of time, but we better stop it here. And there's a gentleman raising a hand in the audience.
Thank you. When we speak about multi-stakeholder model, we have to speak about the role of each stakeholder. Each stakeholder in his or her role. Suppose we are in a hospital and we have to decide whether to undertake a surgery for a patient or not. Shall the nurse, the administrative staff participate in this decision? No, they will be on the table, but not to decide if we have to make the surgery. For example, the financial people will say, no, he didn't pay or he doesn't have any guarantee to pay, so we cannot do it. The nurses can speak about other things related to this patient, but they cannot decide whether to have to undertake this surgery or not. So when we speak about stakeholders, we have to always say each in his role. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
I agree, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a voice around the table. They may not have the final decision, but certainly the ethicist who's sitting at that table and looking at whether it is ethical to perform that particular operation on that patient at that point in time. Indeed, the funding may be part of it. If the surgery is not life-saving, but it's going to put the person in debt for the next 30 years, is that a consideration that needs to be heard? I would actually argue that those people do need a voice. They may not be the final decision. The surgeon and the availability of the surgical team is certainly perhaps a bigger, but even a discussion at that looks cut and dry at the beginning, once you start analyzing what goes into making surgical decisions, you'll find that there's a lot of stakeholders that are involved in that. And so I totally agree with you. You need to look at what the roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder are at every phase of a process, but that doesn't limit the number of stakeholders necessarily. Thanks.
Avri, you are repeating what I said. I exactly said that. I said that they have to be on the table because they have their aspects on the decision. But the medical decision is the role of the doctors. The other parts have their field of their part of the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are many aspects where roles and responsibilities are concerned. So maybe that shows we have a lot of work to be done in the future. Okay, let me conclude this session. Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. And thank you, Avery, Lillian. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful IGF.
Thank you. Bye.
And keep yourself safe.